Hey, everybody. Good morning. I'm rowdy today. It's good to see you all. We have so much stuff to cover today, so I'm just going to leap right in. I have literally like 9 items on my topic list today. All right, so a couple of things we got to talk about to start with. There was a hearing this morning in the Epstein matter. This one concerning additional disclosures of records with regard to the files that were collected on Epstein. Now, this hearing is in front of Judge Preska. I mentioned this morning on Twitter that actually the last trial I ever did as a federal trial lawyer was in front of Judge Preska. She is very no nonsense and very to the letter of the law. So she made a couple of statements this morning about wanting additional briefing on this, and it is apparently due to the fact that there's material in these documents that reveals the names of hundreds of people implicated in Epstein's crimes. Hundreds. So one of you asked a question this morning, very relevant question, as follows. If the president is implicated in Epstein's crimes, can he be prosecuted? The short answer of this is yes. And I will just add that while the DOJ does have this policy of not indicting a sitting president, it doesn't mean he can't be indicted after the fact. It also doesn't cover the states. So if Trump is implicated in the Epstein documents, he can be prosecuted, assuming the statute of limitations hasn't run. Look, somebody complained this morning on Twitter of, this was just another hearing about another hearing. But here's the deal. If Preska doesn't take briefing on this and make a decision that lines up with the letter of law, the ruling will be overturned. And by then, the cat will be out of the bag and the damage will be done. That doesn't bode well. So I want her to do it right with regard to Epstein's documents, particularly if the president is implicated in what's contained in those documents. And she appears to be doing that. So again, we've got a schedule now for that, and we will see what happens next. All right. I want to do a huge shout out. We had some very good news yesterday, and we need good news where we can find it. So North Carolina. Hello, Rachel. I see you there in the comments. We had an enormous ruling, 357-page ruling out of North Carolina yesterday that overturned the gerrymandering of North Carolina congressional districts. This is very, very, very big. What that means is that the districts will be redrawn in time for the 2020 election, which is huge, like huge. By the way, it bodes very well for voting rights in North Carolina and elsewhere. I will remind you all that there are several other cases that have been ruled upon in the last 6 months that go in this direction, one of which has since been overturned. But nonetheless, we're seeing progress in the courts on gerrymandering, and that's phenomenal. And I'm really excited about it. And I know there's a lot of people out there canvassing for McCready. There's a lot of people out there canvassing in North Carolina generally who have been in our RISE program and we're in this community. And I just want to say, it's awesome. It's just absolutely awesome that we're going to have fair mapping now in North Carolina, which we need. So, and we need it everywhere. But, it's especially great to have it in a southern state with a huge population of African-American folks who should have their voting rights upheld. So we're feeling very good about all that. Okay, so that's one bit of good news from yesterday. The other bit of good news, which may not seem like it's all that good news, but honestly it is for the First Amendment, is that Brian Karem, the reporter for Playboy, who had his White House press pass revoked after that scuffle in the Rose Garden about a month and a half ago, won his case against the Trump administration yesterday. And he got his press pass renewed, reinstated. So that's also very good because, by the way, it means that if the president continues to do this crazy stuff of revoking White House press passes for reporters he doesn't like, he's not going to have a leg to stand on again. So those were 2 very big things yesterday that we can all feel very positive about. Free press, First Amendment, end to gerrymandering in North Carolina. All very good. All right. We have other news, however, that is kind of actually, I should mention one other bit of really good news from yesterday before I go on to the bad stuff, which is this. Walmart announced yesterday that it is no longer going to stock ammunition in its stores, and that in and of itself is a very big thing. It's a progress in the direction of gun control. I will just mention that the other thing that is happening today, if you are not aware of this, is there's a full-page editorial in the Washington Post, basically screaming at Mitch McConnell to do something when the Senate comes back on gun control. So we're seeing, a little bit of movement here. Again, I do not have any faith in McConnell. I know, don't at me. I understand. But nonetheless, the outrage is growing, and the fact that we are seeing mass retailers of weapons of mass destruction, even on their own, stepping back from that. And by the way, Walmart also said no open carry in Walmarts. And there's other retailers who have followed suit on that. We are moving at least in some direction. And the good news about this is that public pressure really matters. I as you all know, it's a participatory democracy. We've talked about this here for the better part of 3 years now. All right. So that was also a really good bit of news yesterday. All right. So, couple of things that are not so hot that we have to talk about. The first is Brexit. Okay, so I mentioned on Twitter this morning, so this is kind of a really weird little bit of personal trivia. Back in the day, when I was a lawyer, and I was like 3 years out of law school, I was very junior at that point. I got put in charge of all discovery for a global case against Monsanto involving genetically engineered seeds. It was the moment where GMOs were first coming into the market, and we had both an environmental and an antitrust case related to this. This was at a peak moment in the UK and the EU, where there was a real push against the environmental damage that was potentially arising out of GMOs. So I ended up doing a lot of work in the UK over the course of several years. And one of the things that resulted from that was that I ended up doing a lot of coordinated work. That's a good word, actually. Coordinated work with some MPs, members of Parliament. I got to go to Prime Minister's Questions, and I got to have dinner in the members of Parliament dining room with one of the most left-leaning labor leaders, and got into all the kind of back rooms of the Houses of Parliament. It was super fun. But one of the things that resulted from that is that I now have a little bit of a sort of fascination with British legal procedure. So if you wanted a crash course in it, today and yesterday were a pretty good example. So let me just give you the short version of what's happening. We talked yesterday about the fact that Boris Johnson lost his majority in Parliament when one of the Conservative Party members crossed, literally in the middle of his speech, crossed across the Parliament to join the Liberal Democrats on the other side, which is not the Labour Party. It's a third party. And the result of that is that Boris lost his majority, which is a very big deal. Since then, everybody's been trying to figure out what happens next. So he lost a big vote yesterday on Brexit when a number of Conservative Party members also voted against that resolution. As of this morning, there is an ongoing debate about whether there's going to be a snap election in the UK, which would result in potentially a new prime minister. And let's keep in mind, he's only been the prime minister for 4 months because of the fiasco with Theresa May and Brexit. So the other thing about this that is now completely unclear is whether or not, because there's all sorts of noises being made about this on the EU side of the fence too, is whether or not Brexit is still going to take place in October with no deal, which by the way would predict at least some very serious global economic impact as a result of that, as we talked about on this broadcast for the last few days, or whether Brexit would then be extended to January. If there is a snap election held, it's held within 6 weeks. So it's chaos right now in the UK. And I will just add, by the way, that the drama of Boris Johnson, I know the president has said bullshit a whole bunch of times, right? Boris Johnson said the word shit on the floor of Parliament. And in the UK, you kind of it's just astonishing that he did that, let alone that there was a lot of pouting and childish behavior when he was asked to not insult people in particular ways. It's just, it's chaos. And, it's the implications of it are not small. That's the other thing that I just want to reiterate here. I mean, it's all great for Putin, as we've talked about on the broadcast over the last couple of days. The thing that concerns me the most, and I think concerns everyone the most from a global standpoint, is exactly the potential economic impact of a no-deal Brexit. And the result right now is that what appears to be the case is that the vast majority of citizens of the UK do not want a Brexit anymore. But they won't call a vote. a new referendum on it. So it's wild. I mean, it's just wild. And I will just add, yes, it is crazy. Yes, this is the way the rest of the world has been looking at us for the last 2.5 years. And yes, it is a fiasco. And I think the big question now is whether or not we're going to end up with a no-deal Brexit and the global economy will take a massive hit as a result of that, or whether or not the UK will self-correct. And I vastly hope that that's the case, because, by the way, that would be a really good jolt in the arm for the rest of us over here to self-correct heading into 2020. But we'll see. It's one to watch. I mean, it's definitely, it's crazy. I will tell you, by the way, that I've started following a couple of the primary political reporters in the UK, just so I'm up to speed on the details of all of this. And I encourage you guys to do the same. I retweeted a whole bunch of them this morning, and you can follow along and have a look. So that's that. All right. Next bit of news that just want to mention is the situation with Brad Parscale, who we've talked about quite a bit on this broadcast over the last 2.5 years. He was, along with Jared Kushner, largely responsible for the data manipulation that happened in 2016 as a part of Cambridge Analytica and the work with the Trump campaign. He is now the 2020 campaign chairman for Trump. There's been a number of disclosures over the last couple of weeks about some very, I'm just going to call it what appear to be very illegal financial arrangements that have been made with Brad Parscale, his wife, and various political action committees, not to mention the fact that he's apparently been paid like hundreds of thousands of dollars now out of the campaign coffers itself. One of you asked, like, what's going to happen as a result of this? Well, there could very well be investigations, but I will remind you all that one of the problems with Citizens United, that Supreme Court case that allowed dark money into politics, is that it has allowed for donations to be made to super PACs anonymously in huge amounts. And even though it is illegal, of course, to funnel foreign money into any U.S. election, that has happened. We know it's happened. It's happened through the NRA. Everybody is aware of this. There's no way to fundamentally stop this absent a direct, provable felony for which Parscale could be prosecuted, or without overturning Citizens United. And I will remind you all that there have been bills on the floor of the House and the Senate that have sought to overturn Citizens United, like literally since the decision came down, that have never gotten a vote. So this is yet again another reason why it is so important that we flip the Senate and we win the presidency in 2020. Because if we can overturn Citizens United with legislation, that goes a long way to protecting our elections going forward from foreign influence. It doesn't address the social media component of it, but it certainly addresses foreign money. And foreign money is what gets us those crazy ad buys where, like, you're inundated with insane lying political ads in swing states in the weeks before any major election. So, look, long and the short of it is Parscale may be investigated by the Congress. He may be investigated by the criminal authorities. It's all possible, right? If he's committed a crime, hopefully he'll be prosecuted. But in the interim, is there any way that this whole morass of swampiness heading into 2020 with regard to the Trump campaign is likely to stop? Nope. Not until he's out of office. I mean, I hate to say it again, but that is the likely means by which this will all end. Okay. One of you asked a very broad general question, which I just wanted to address, which was like, is anybody doing anything about the border crisis? The answer to that is yes. And, I want to just remind all of you that if you think nothing is going on at the border, please make donations to the small organizations, agencies that are supporting migrants who are in detention and coming out of detention. That includes places like the Border Network for Human Rights. It includes organizations like RAICIS. It includes organizations like the Coalition to End Child Detention. These are smaller, RAICIS is large, but there are plenty of smaller organizations along the border who are fighting tooth and nail on shoestring budgets every day to try to get people out of detention. I'll also just add that we still continue to have efforts by Congress to go into some of these detention camps to see what they can see. And it was just last week that Elijah Cummings was turned away and wrote a letter to the Customs and Border Protection Agency about all of this, about the fact that actual members of Congress and their staff were being turned away from facilities and therefore couldn't conduct oversight. So, the one thing I just want to say about this, which I want to make really clear, because, we should not, we can't ignore how dire this is. Okay. Yesterday, we learned that they're finally going to honor deferred action and not deport people who need life-saving treatment who are in the United States. That's largely thanks to Rachel Maddow and her reporting. But the reality of where we are right now is that this administration is lawless when it comes to immigration law, right? Even at this moment, with the new Flores regs that have been submitted to the court, they're not supposed to have implemented them yet, and we have indications that they already have. So, the key here to remember is that you can do something to support people who are actually doing the on-the-ground work, and you should. You can also volunteer, by the way, or you can go protest. Like, we have people in this community who are showing up at detention camps every single day right now to protest. There are all sorts of ways to take action and make your voice heard. And I just want to say this. I think we would be foolish to assume that any of this is going to end until he's out of office. I don't see Stephen Miller backing down from anything. And there doesn't seem to be any kind of immediate criminal accountability for him when he undertakes these policies that are deadly. Deadly. I mean, we learned yesterday about a new undocumented man who committed suicide after being held in solitary confinement for 21 days straight with mental illness. They don't care. They don't care. And so, again, I'm going to say it again because, I know there were people, I mentioned this yesterday, there were people on the feed on Friday who were like, I'm tired of hearing you talk about organizing for 2020. Well, 2020 is the whole game at this point in time, right? Like, if there isn't an actual impeachment of the president, articles of impeachment filed, voted on by House Judiciary, voted up by the Senate, voted on by the House, leading to trial in the Senate, 2020 is the only way he gets out of office. And the really high profile immigration rights activists that I am talking to as recently as last week don't think that they have any intent or interest in abiding by the law any longer when it comes to anything having to do with people of color, people with brown skin, anyone who comes from another country. They're going to kind of do whatever the fuck they want. I hate to put it in those terms, but that's how it's going to be. So our obligation as concerned citizens and moral people is to support the on-the-ground organizations that are doing the work to actually really help get people out of detention, help get people settled in homes and get them food and medicine and everything else. And then vote him out of office in numbers too big to be messed with. And yes, to answer the question that's popping up on the feed right now, yes, Stephen Miller can be held accountable. Yes, we're going to need Nuremberg-style trials when this is all over. Yes, he can be prosecuted. But it's not going to happen until he's out of office, until Trump is out of office and Stephen Miller is out of power. So it's incredibly important. Some of you may be bored with it, but I'm just going to keep saying it over and over again. If you think going door to door and talking to your neighbors is, a pittance and won't make a difference, I got news for you on this front. It's the only thing actually heading into 2020 that's likely to make sure that all of this stops in any significant and substantial way. So it's serious business. It's serious business. And that brings me to kind of what was the last question for the day, which is this. And it's a very good question. One of you asked me about what do we do about our friends and neighbors who are so happy to just post political memes all over social media and complain relentlessly, but not take action. So, there's a couple of ways that I just want to recommend that you address this. The first is that you lead by example, right? You host a postcard writing party in your house and you invite them to come and sit with you for 2 hours and write postcards to voters. You volunteer at the local Democratic Party to register people to vote. And you say to this person, I'm going down there to register people to vote. Do you want to come with me? If it's someone who's unable to leave their house, help them, say, let's do a phone bank party together at your place, right? I'll come over and we'll phone bank together at your kitchen table. There are plenty of ways to get people involved. Now, let me just say this. There are certainly people out there in the world who are very happy to complain and happy to not take action. I think the key right now is that we have to make it clear to people what the cost is of not doing something, right? The cost of that is human lives. It's not the cost of being annoyed behind your computer. It's not the cost of being stressed out. It's not the cost of, feeling like, you don't live in a democracy anymore. It's human lives. There's human lives at stake every day, right now. And there will continue to be. So, I think everybody should be doing what they can do within their ability status, frankly. I think the way to motivate people is to do it yourself and invite them along. And, I don't think it never works to chastise or shame people for not doing enough, right? I know I've done that from time to time on this broadcast, but let me just say this. It's much better to say to people, here's what I'm doing, or here's what could be done. Let's do it together, right? Because that's more inspiring and you feel better coming out of it, and it's uplifting and you're making a difference, right? Go from that place. Right? And do what you can do and invite people along for the ride. And before you know it, you'll be a community organizer without even meaning to do it. Or maybe you will, right? So I think that's really the key. And, the other thing that I will say is that it's important to me, because I feel really strongly about this, at least as far as Twitter goes. If you're going to share something on Twitter, try to make it informative. Like a meme that just puts the president behind bars, or makes him look like he's Jabba the Hutt, all this sort of fat shaming included. Let me just say this. That's not informative and it doesn't inspire people. So, if you're going to share something on social media, share something because it educates, it informs, it inspires, or it motivates people to get out and do something. Don't just share stuff because it's a complaint, right? Because we've got plenty of things to complain about. The question is, what are we going to do to solve it? All right, so that's it for today. Very rough and ready, huge number of topics over the course of 21 minutes and counting. So much love to all of you. We'll be here regular time tomorrow. And I just want to mention one other thing, which is that there's going to be a couple of days in September, thanks to this new super secret project that I'm working on, which I can't tell you anything about, but it's like the raddest shit I've ever been involved in. That I will not be able to broadcast, but I will keep you going on that. I have work travel basically to do in relation to that. But I will keep you posted on that. It's probably only going to be 2 or 3 days this month. But you will have warning well in advance of that. As always, if I am unable to broadcast, it will be on the Patreon feed. And I want to thank you all for being here as always. Much love to all of you. Do your part today. I know you all will. All right. I'll talk to all of you tomorrow. Bye.